Hello. Today I plan to continue with the Teika area around the VEF as I was walking around there a few days ago. But it was raining. Looked like it would be a very bad day to go somewhere further out of the center. So I decided that instead I could look at Old Town today, the old Riga. This is a part of Riga, of course, which is most well known for tourists. And here we see that the Occupation Museum is getting rebuilt, or there's a wing added a new wing to it, so there will be a better exposition there. Over the river there's a National Library building, and here's the Riga Technical University main building and the monument for Latvian riflemen from the First World War. And yes, this monument is built in the Soviet times when it was dedicated more to the Red Riflemen, which were maybe not that positive in the whole scheme of things. Like they fought for the Soviet government and also fought against Estonians in the war for freedom in Estonia and in other places. But of course, there were a lot of like regular riflemen from First World War, and then later the ones that joined to fight for independence of Latvia. And yes, if we go further, of course, we see that actually the Riga Old Town, in many places, yeah, it's not really that old actually, as it's called Old Town, but this area actually saw destruction during World War II in 1941 when the Nazis were occupying Latvia. And yes, there was a lot of bombs dropped precisely in this area, and therefore it is how it is now. Like here you see some pictures how it looked like. This whole area was pretty much destroyed, and in the early Soviet years there was no reconstructions. Only later St. Peter's Church was being reconstructed, but other buildings around here they were basically demolished, and therefore the new buildings were had to be put in place instead of these old ones. So this area was pretty much razed to the ground. Yeah, and as you see, here is one modernist architecture example from Soviet times. Then it's the rebuilt House of Blackheads from '99. Then it's the recent 2021 building, the building from '90s, the building from also from beginning of the 21st century, and this is a Soviet building, Technical University main building. So this is all basically just built again, not really even renovated. The House of Blackheads was sort of renovated, but they didn't know how the interiors really looked like, so it's all also kind of new. And these buildings in the background, also the new buildings, there's nothing old about them. This is in front also an Soviet architecture example for Riga Old Town. It's actually Soviet times. It just looks like these buildings are perhaps older, but it's just Soviet period. I think 70s or something like that. And even yeah, if you look further out, that orange building and these buildings, these are all also new. So there are a lot of buildings here that kind of look like they are old, but they are actually built again as they would be in those times. And some buildings like here you can see on the left side, which are completely new, and it's just the beginning of the 21st century, maybe 15 years old or something like that. And even some glass there, which kind of gives it away even if you don't see it by yourself. And here again, in front of us, the brick house, the red brick house. Again, it's just 5 to 7 years old, I think, something like that. And it was really nice building. I think it fits there, and most of the people like it, so that's fine. Uh, yeah, the city is changing, and a lot of things here in the old Riga are actually not that old, and I think that mainly the old part is yeah this lower part of the Peter's Cathedral and some other church buildings here and some houses. So there's always this discussion about how we proceed if the war has torn up the buildings. Do we build again the same way as they were before, or do we allow new architecture? And it's also like discussion in Riga among people is rather fierce, and some people just want replicas to build instead of the lost ones, and other people allow for newer buildings to be built there. Because new buildings also can tell a story about the city. So as you can see here is a bit older part. There's some more interesting places where you can go in the old town, and then there's shopping mall and all modern recent additions. Yes, the modern buildings also tell their story because like all these renovated buildings like House of Blackheads during the independence period now and other buildings around it when we tried to assert like our independence and to restore as much as we had um, that square. Also building the rat house or the city council house, which is also modern. You can see that it's modern, but at least the facade, they tried to keep it like the old one, although maybe that was not the most successful renovation. And there's, of course, some bad examples from the early 21st century there, which just shows the state at which the architecture was. And yeah, and here is some glass just over the next to this old shop, the wooden frames and windows. So it also tells kind of story of rebirth of the country. First renovations, of course, started already in the Soviet times, and then some were continued in independence era. And well, like these buildings in front here, some were rebuilt as replicas, some were built like modern ones, but here too in this square, there's nothing really that old. There's additions of all kinds of eras and mostly just 19th century buildings and times from the 30s or modern replicas. Or yes, when you look at this, it doesn't look like the medieval old town, so to say, because it's all has been built up later in later periods. So the most valuable thing about Old Riga is the old street layout and maybe here and there some older buildings. But it looks pretty and tourists like it, so it's also included in the UNESCO World Heritage, but I think it was mainly due to the old layout of the streets. I think that was the main reason why they did it. And here in front you also see one large and distinct building that has something to say about the time it was built in. I think it's kind of clear from how the building looks at which period it was built. So it was late 30s under our president dictator Karl Sulmanis, the Ministry of Finance building, where he wanted to like completely rebuild parts of old Riga because there was this German architecture and he didn't like it, so he needed Latvia to assert its own place and to build grand modern buildings that would kind of show the zeitgeist of the times and the fact that yes, we can, like Latvians, can build really great and monumental buildings. There are a lot of plans, so this building is part of that, and this square actually is. There were a lot more old houses there, and they were demolished in the 30s to make for a square. So it was also under his plan, and there even was a plan in the Rat House area in the Peter's Church or Peter's Cathedral area, which we looked at the beginning, to build a new city government building there and a huge tower. But due to war, it didn't happen. Although I would say that this square is nice. Maybe in the old times in 20s and before there were some nice medieval houses, and it sure perhaps it would look better. But yeah, I kind of like it, and maybe that's because we are already used to that. We don't remember how it looked before, and well, that's part of how cities change, I guess. Because city is a living organism, and sometimes you can't do anything, and some buildings are lost, some buildings are taken their place. But most importantly, I think it's whether they will have anything to tell to next coming generations, which will come after us. If the young people, our children, will ask their grannies who built the building and why it was built, and what was the history of it. So it's good that this old street layout is at least saved and there are some old buildings around. So at least we try to keep what we can now, what is possible. Like here is the Three Brothers, Soli Deo Gloria, or Glory to the Single God, the building from end of 15th century, and the two others, which are like the oldest and most famous buildings in Old Town from 15th to 17th centuries. And right next to them is this 1879 one, which is also already more than 100 years old. And yes, if we go a bit further, just we can look at these old buildings once again here. But yeah, if we look further, is the Jacob's Cathedral here, which was started already in the beginning of 13th century. So yeah, there's still some interesting and old buildings left. So not all is completely lost and new with the Riga Old Town. Some nice narrow streets here. And right next to this Jacob's Cathedral, there's the Latvian Saima or Parliament building, as you can see here. It was built in 1867 as a house for Livonian Noble Corporation and housed the local Landtag until Latvia's independence. So it was government building already then. And it was, of course, renovated for several times in 1922 for the independent Latvia's parliament needs, and then later, of course. And this is kind of a government quarter with some other buildings for government. And it's always good to go around these small streets and imagine how life was back in the day here in Old Town. Just looking around, maybe not all of these buildings are really that old, but the feeling is still there. Like some buildings still remain, like this Swedish gate. It was built just by making hole in the city wall to provide access to Swedish barracks, which were located outside the wall. So yeah, here you can also see this yellow building, which are the Swedish barracks, which were also built at that time, at the end of the 17th century, when Riga was the property of Swedes. And there are renovations in this Swedish barracks now at the moment, and also the powder tower is being renovated. So there's hopefully we will see them back to the old glory like they were before. This is just a long, uninterrupted building, similar to that finance ministry building there in the old town. So you kind of can imagine how many of Swedish military officers and regular soldiers that were housed there. So yeah, and here's a nice um, artifact from there, like some old gun. Now we are kinda moving away from the old town already in the direction of the city canal. And yes, as I said here, there are restorations happening with the old powder tower. So that's if you plan to see it in Riga now during the pandemics, and so it's not possible. It's under renovation. But yet, and there in the background, we see the Bastei Counts or Basteiberg, because in German times, when they demolished the old ramparts of Riga fortress, they built this hill there, Bastei Counts. And otherwise, yeah, Riga is flat as pancake, and here you just can read about Riga's budget for this year if you're interested. But as you probably noticed throughout the video, since all this COVID situation, the old town is pretty empty, and it was raining also today, so there was pretty much nobody, just a few tourists there, and those tourists also maybe just from Latvia, or there were some foreigners, but very few, like maybe 5, 6 people that I saw, which could be considered foreign tourists. So yeah, I decided to just climb up the hill and look below how it looks, how the Riga looks like from the top of the hill. Because I haven't been here actually that, maybe a few years ago I've been there actually, but usually in the regular days, yeah, you don't have any need to climb up the Bastei hill and just look what's happening. But just because I was making videos, so thought it would be nice to just check the view there. Although maybe the time is not the perfect one, because of course it would be better in spring, in summer, or in autumn when all the leaves fall and you have this all the covering of the golden and yellow leaves. But still, yeah, if you climb up, there's some places to sit, some tables, and you can see the old town part of Riga and the canal and these like gardens which separate the old town from the rest of the city. And yeah, it's a nice view, because otherwise in Riga it's hard to get like these views from the top unless you pay to get up the church spires somewhere, or that's that. Yeah, the only thing it's climb these bus accounts. It's kind of sad that Riga is so flat, because if we take both other Baltic capitals like Tallinn and Vilnius, you can always climb somewhere and see everything from the top. But here in Riga, it's not that big of a height to just look at the city. It's rather calm, raining still. Not all the snow has been melted away, but rather calm city with all the COVID situation and the tourism, this which is practically non-existent. It's a kind of different vibe, like you would usually get climbing on this hill or just walking around the old town or the center area. Especially nice that in the last few years, all the buildings, all the facades have been renovated here and on the other side, so it looks prettier every year. There's more and more places getting sorted out, so that's great to see. And hopefully, yeah, hopefully in future we will see more of the Riga, more of the areas outside the center being brought back to shape. Here's the Lima clock, also very famous already since 1920s. It's standing there as a popular meeting spot for people who go on date or just need to meet each other, especially in the times before smartphones, where you called somebody or you said that we will meet at that time at Lima clock. And here's the opera house and the gardens around it. So it was all melting away, so not that great to walk around, but but still nice architecture. And this place hasn't changed for 150 years, probably, or something like that. There haven't been many additions there, aside from this statue of former Riga mayor George Armistead, which was the mayor in the golden age of Riga, from late end of 19th century till the almost First World War, when Riga was booming and there were lots of buildings built up and Riga was expanding rapidly. So he's well liked, and there's also his statue with his wife and dog there. Yeah, if we walk around this part, there's the opera, there's this small bridge, and there in front there's the main building of the University of Latvia. This all hasn't changed much in the last 150 years. Of course, that hotel in the background there, that's the Soviet edition because the old one was bombed during the war. But on this side here, the University of Latvia building and others, these are like the originals. And yes, and then if you look here, of course, there's the glass office building, which is again later addition, and central station in the background. But that just concludes my walk today. And yeah, it was nice. It's always good. I always like to walk around the old town because it gives you some kind of an inspiration of the older generations, all the generations that have been there before us.